The day the sun disappeared was the day everything changed. In an instant, darkness swallowed the world, and creatures that once hid in the shadows stepped forward as its new rulers. Humanity wasn't just unprepared. Heroes were outmatched by a threat built perfectly for a world without light. Hey everyone, welcome back to Panelix. Today we're breaking down the chaos inside Blood Hunt 2024, one of the darkest events ever unleashed by Marvel Comics. This storyline pulls in heroes from every corner of the universe: Avengers, street-level vigilantes, magic users, even those who usually thrive at night. But in this event, the rules of the world shift. With the sun gone, the balance of power flips, and suddenly the predators who once lurked in fear become the dominant force. What's terrifying is that the vampire uprising isn't random. It's strategic, coordinated, and brutally efficient. Cities fall within hours, heroes vanish, and the world is forced to confront a takeover that feels unstoppable, because the enemy has already won before the fight begins. So let's step into the darkness and uncover how the vampire conquest began, and how the Marvel Universe was pushed to the edge. This is the full Blood Hunt storyline. Let's get into it. It is now 12 minutes before the sun death. Black energy spreads from Blackout's body, surrounding him. It turns out that not only Blackout, but Dusk is also enveloped by black energy. In addition, Hunter's moon is attacking Shroud, who is also affected by the dark force in his body. Darkstar also appears to be hurt as the black energy in her body bursts out, causing her to fall to the ground. Elsewhere, Cloak experiences the same thing, black energy erupting from his body when it is 6 minutes before sun death. Even Silhouette also releases dark force from within her body, and it all envelops the earth, turning it black. 00:15:26 before sun death in New York. Scarlet Witch was floating in the air and saw people below her panicking at something in front of them. Nearby, the police were trying to control them so they wouldn't rush forward. Iron Man contacted Scarlet Witch and asked her how things were below, because from where he was looking, down from the sky, the situation looked bad. Scarlet Witch explains that Marcus Daniels, also known as Blackout, was robbing a bank when he suddenly exploded. Blackout's black energy burst out of his body and rose into the sky in front of Scarlet Witch. Iron Man, who was flying in the sky, said that he had received news that superhumans around the world were experiencing the same thing, including Darkstar, Dusk, Silhouette, and Cloak. Scarlet Witch discovered that they were all users of Dark Force, and they had become portals to the Dark Force dimension. Scarlet Witch approached Blackout with red energy in her hands, while Iron Man asked her over the communication device if she could close the portal. Scarlet Witch agreed, even saying she would hit Galactus afterwards. Iron Man was currently in the sky, near one of the places where Dark Force was rising into the sky. Scarlet Witch informs him that this energy comes from all dimensions and is forcing its way into their dimension through several portals. Iron Man replies that he understands, but Scarlet Witch suggests that Iron Man closed the leak with his robot suit. However, Iron Man thinks that they can close the hole with magic because with the dark force in the atmosphere, they are starting to lose the sun. 00:25:19 after the sun dies. At the place where Shroud was, which became the dark force portal to ascend to the sky, Tigra checked her cell phone and found that this incident was not only experienced by Shroud, while Hunter's moon, who was watching Shroud, asked if anyone else was experiencing what Shroud was experiencing. Tigra explained that the whole world was experiencing it. Hunter's moon muttered that this dark force was turning the sky black, hiding the sun and the moon. Suddenly, there was a loud noise above them, and seeing what was coming, Hunter's moon exclaimed that this was not an accident, but an attack. Tigra replied that they were vampires, and then many vampires were seen jumping from the roof of the building to where they were. In Milan, Italy, 34 minutes after the sun death. At Milan Cathedral, the vampires mercilessly bit the citizens. Meanwhile, in Lagos, Nigeria, vampires swarmed and attacked people in the market where people gathered. In Calgary, Canada, corpses were scattered on the snow due to attacks by red-eyed vampires. In Tianjin, China, people screamed in panic as vampires jumped from buildings onto crowds of civilians. 45 minutes after sun death in Cartagena, Colombia, 2 vampires entered someone's house through a window while a small child hid behind a chair so as not to be caught. Meanwhile, in Daegu, South Korea, vampires were seen emerging from the water and walking onto land. 00:58:39 after sun death. 2 people were seen running from the vampires. The one leading the way urged his friend to follow him, as the area ahead was the border of the country. But his friend said they couldn't cross the border. However, he didn't care because they had no choice. Strangely, as soon as the 2 men crossed the border, the vampires trying to catch them immediately burned up upon entering that territory. Doom observed all of this from the balcony of his Doomstadt fortress in Latveria. He commented that Latveria's borders had proven to be secure, and he ordered that the 2 new citizens be taken care of, as loyalty begins with gratitude. Apparently, the 2 had just crossed the Latvian border. 1 hour after sun death in Brooklyn, United States, Spider-Man was seen stabbing a vampire while saying that vampires were everywhere. After killing the vampire, Spider-Man began to ponder what Blade would do to deal with these vampires. Suddenly, Blade appeared and said that he had a plan, but it wasn't him who would carry it out, but Spider-Man. A second later, the heroes faced the vampires while coordinating through their communication channels. Thor, who swings Mjolnir at the vampires in front of him, asks the Avengers where all these vampires came from, and Captain Marvel, who unleashes an attack from her hands, asks Black Panther, who is usually smarter. However, Black Panther, who is stabbing the vampires with his spear, replies that he doesn't know. Vision flies and attacks the vampires in front of him with laser beams from his eyes, saying that his information tells him that it wasn't Dracula who did this. On the other hand, Captain America throws his shield to kill the vampires, saying that after creating the vampire nation, it's impossible for Dracula to do something like this. Scarlet Witch, who used her magic to burn the vampires, asked Captain America who the culprit was because there were so many of them. But suddenly, there was a warning for the Avengers on their communication devices. Scarlet Witch asked who it was, and it turned out to be the voice of Blade, who was in a large truck. He claimed he was on the run and had information, so they needed to meet. He asks them to find his coordinates and transport him and the truck to Impossible City, the Avengers' headquarters, after which he cuts off communication. Iron Man, who is already at Impossible City, calls City, who has locked Blade's vehicle so it can transport him. Then Tony contacts the Avengers to return to Impossible City as well. The Avengers appeared to be walking out of a portal of light. Captain Marvel insisted that Tony finish this quickly because they were still needed on Earth. Thor agreed with Carol, saying he needed to vent his anger on the enemies below because there were so many of them, and their time was limited without the sun. Suddenly, Blade's truck appeared at the location and immediately stopped. Carol walked closer, greeting Blade and asking what was going on, but unexpectedly, Carol screamed in pain while covering her ears. Next to her, the Avengers also covered their ears due to the pain. From the direction of the truck, someone said that Daywalker, also known as Blade, couldn't come here, but he was grateful for their invitation to come. The voice belonged to Bloodstorm 1, coming from a box behind the truck. He ordered Megrim to maintain the psychic static attack, then told Cruel and Unusual to take care of Scarlet Witch. Damascene was directed to face Thor, while Smoke Eater was ordered to protect him. It turned out that they were the Blood Coven. Smoke Eater said he was following his master's orders, not Bloodstorm 1's, but then he opened something that released smoke and inhaled it, causing his face to be covered in small eyes and his body to grow numerous extra hands. Bloodstorm 1 didn't care how much crematorium smoke he inhaled, but he was the leader of the Blood Coven, and Smoke Eater had to obey him. At that moment, Black Panther and Captain America stepped forward to face Smoke Eater. On the other hand, Unusual approached Scarlet Witch, who was still covering her ears, and said that they were similar, while Damascene used his claws to slash Thor's hand. Seeing this, Thor asked if he had slashed him. Bloodstorm 1 threw Black Panther towards Captain America while explaining that Damascene could cut through the skin of an Asgardian god, or the molecules of an intangible synthezoid. At that moment, Vision appears to attack Bloodstorm 1. but Damascene throws the steel in his hand through Vision's chest, causing him to scream in pain. Iron Man intends to attack Damascene with a shot from his hand, but Cruel uses a coil of wire to wrap around Iron Man. Surprised, Iron Man asks how the coil could get inside his armor. Iron Man falls to the ground while Cruel says that his suffering is truly enjoyable, especially when his armor is open later. On the other hand, Captain Marvel was still holding her head, which was affected by Megrim, asking what they had done to her head. A moment later, Smoke Eater knocked Captain Marvel down while explaining that Cruel ate pain, Unusual ate magic, Smoke Eater himself ate spirit, while Megrim ate thoughts and left only pain. Bloodstorm 1 is seen pushing Captain America around, saying that he wants to turn Cap into a vampire as a symbol of the fall of their species. He then throws Cap into a wall, and behind him, Black Panther throws his spear, shouting that he can only try to do it. At the same time, Thor screams as Damascene's iron claws slash him. Scarlet Witch attacks Unusual with her magic, but Unusual consumes it and comments that this is the first time he has felt magic like this. Smoke Eater grabs Captain Marvel's leg and swings her around, saying that he drank his strongest ghost to face Captain Marvel, and intends to save Captain Marvel's ghost for another special occasion. Meanwhile, Iron Man, who is wrapped in Cruel's wire, receives a warning that his system has been compromised, and Tony says he already knows that. A weakened Thor says that Damascene can cut him, but cannot turn him into a vampire and kill him, while Cruel, who is facing Vision, replies that they will keep Thor. Damascene then throws a piece of steel that pierces Thor's head. Bloodstorm 1 walks towards Captain America, who is lying on the ground, convinced that his master is pleased with the results of the Blood Coven. At that moment, Black Panther tries to order City to prepare for dimensional transfer, but City, who is entangled in Cruel's wires, replies that it is being hijacked, and Cruel comments that City can also feel pain. Cap, who had gotten back up, told T'Challa that they had thought everything through, but T'Challa replied that they hadn't. And he ran to attack Bloodstorm 1 while ordering City to evacuate Captain America. Cap refused, but he still disappeared with Captain Marvel, Vision, and Iron Man. An angry Bloodstorm 1 stabbed T'Challa while Cap shouted for the helpless T'Challa and said that the world needed a symbol. Bloodstorm 1 shouted angrily because only T'Challa, Thor, and Scarlet Witch remained at the scene. 1:23:19 After the Sun Death on Bleecker Street. Someone was seen walking towards a building surrounded by fire. Inside the building, Clea and Steven were seen opening a book of magic. Clea argued that they should be outside, but Steven said that if they could create the Montesi formula, all of this would end. Soon after, Blade enters the room and says that using a spell to kill every vampire on Earth is amazing, but Strange needs the Darkhold to do it. And Wanda Maximoff, aka Scarlet Witch, has already consumed the Darkhold. Strange admits he is happy to see an old friend and asks what he needs, and Blade explains that the rebellious vampires this time are organized to overthrow humans and make vampires the rulers. Strange, who had been floating, landed again, while Blade continued that these vampires were part of Structure, a vampire cult that had spread throughout the world. Their leader had been killed by Moon Knight, but a new leader had taken over with a well-thought-out plan. First, they used the antediluvian Atlantean ritual to blow up Dark Force users and turn them into portals to block out the sun. Second, they staged a global rebellion by releasing vampires in all densely populated areas. And third, they defeated the Avengers. Hearing this, Strange was shocked, and even Clea felt it was absurd. Blade took off his glasses and explained that there were ultra-vampires who drank the blood of superhumans and gained power from consuming pain, ghosts, or magic. He assured them that the Blood Coven was a strong opponent for the Avengers and that the Avengers had truly fallen. Steven felt that this meant the formula should be created immediately using the spellbook, but Blade questioned whether Strange would truly kill all the vampires, as some of them were on Strange's side. Strange replied that he was a doctor, and that it was better for him to cut off a body part to save a patient or the world. Blade found that impressive because he was sure Wanda Maximoff would never cast a spell to kill all humans, but he wasn't sure Strange would be the same as Wanda. Strange reopened the book floating in front of him and asked if Dracula was the leader of this structure, but Blade instead asked if he wanted to know who turned off the sun, released the vampires, and gathered monsters to kill the Avengers. Then the tip of Blade's sword pierced Strange's chest, and he added that it was Blade who did all of that. In Impossible City, Thor is hanging upside down with his head, hands, and feet pierced by pieces of steel, and a silver layer on his head that acts as a shield to block teleportation. On the other side, Scarlet Witch is curled up in pain on the ground with rune bindings surrounding her, while Blade is standing on the deck of the city and saying that they are safe in a place that has been taken over by this monster. He asks T'Challa, who has become a new monster, how he feels. T'Challa has clearly turned into a vampire, and he growls at Blade, who challenges him to fight as the king of all vampires. He brings his face close to T'Challa's and tells him to fight the current that even the arrogant Atlanteans can drown in. Blade then walked onto the bridge and ordered Black Panther to get his reward and Blood Coven to find his daughter. A moment later, Blood Coven and T'Challa disappeared in the light of the teleportation portal in New York City. A mother was cornered with her 2 children, pointing a taser at several vampires and telling them to back off. At that moment, a purple-haired girl carrying a short sword came and cut off the head of one of the 3 vampires to emphasize that she said they had to back off. But the 2 vampires attacked her instead, so the girl decided to take drastic measures. Suddenly, the 2 vampires were cut to pieces at super speed and set on fire. It turned out that Dracula had come to help. He told the girl, whom he called Belle, that they didn't have time for this. Moreover, according to Dracula, Brielle's life was more valuable than protecting these meaningless creatures, and again, he was protecting her from Atlanta, not for this. Brielle corrected him, saying that Dracula should call them innocent people instead of meaningless creatures. Dracula reminded her that they were both helpless because of the blood hunt taking place all over the world, but then a voice continued Dracula's words, saying that Brielle was the one being hunted. The person greeted Dracula and Brielle, the child of Blade. Brielle looked surprised to see the person in front of her. In Uptown, Tigra and Hunter's Moon were seen fighting vampires. Tigra kicked a vampire's head off its neck while reminding Hunter's Moon to watch his left side. Hunter's Moon, who was still slashing the vampire in front of him, shifted his attention to his left and swung his sword to kill the vampire while thanking Tigra. Tigra tells the humans inside the building that this is the last vampire, they just need to lock the door and barricade it, while she and Hunter's Moon go find Strange to solve this problem. Suddenly, Spider-Man appears above them. He asks if they are talking about Doctor Strange, and Hunter's Moon and Tigra look surprised by Spider-Man's appearance. Tigra uncertainly called him Spider-Man, and Spider-Man confirmed that he was the other Spider-Man. He asked Tigra if the person next to her was the other Moon Knight. Tigra left, confirming Spider-Man's guess. Tigra explains that they are going to Strange's house, at which point Spider-Man swings on his web and says he doesn't know how to find Strange's house. Tigra asks if he is serious, and Spider-Man reasons that he is new and no one told him this. They finally arrive at Strange's house, which is engulfed in flames. Tigra comments that Spider-Man does not look new at all, but Spider-Man adds that he has never visited this village before. Hunter's Moon tells Spider-Man that he doesn't need to feel bad because he also doesn't know where it is, while Tigra knocks on the door and calls for Strange to open it. Unexpectedly, Strange came out through the door in his astral form and welcomed Tigra. Tigra entered the house and said that vampires were everywhere. The sky was black, and the world looked like hell, while Doctor Strange was relaxing at home as a ghost. Tigra suggested that Doctor Strange cast a protective spell or something similar. Doctor Strange explains that he is in his astral form because something has happened to his human form, and it is also hell here. They enter a room where Doctor Strange's body has turned into a vampire and is being controlled by Clea with her magical energy. Back to Dracula. It turns out that it was Blood Coven who arrived. Dracula greeted Bloodstorm 1 and said that he hadn't seen his clone in a long time, while Bloodstorm 1 asked if Dracula was impressed with his growth, how he had become a monster. Dracula gripped his sword with his eyes glowing red, declaring that he was Vlad Tepes Dracula, and as the master of all vampires, Bloodstorm 1 must kneel before him. But according to Bloodstorm 1, Dracula was a false king, while the one he served was the true king with the real philosophy of their race. At that moment, the Avengers appear, and Captain Marvel says that their philosophy is that they have much to avenge. Behind Captain Marvel, Captain America, Iron Man, and Vision can be seen. Bloodstorm 1 laughs heartily at the sight of them finally finding the remaining members of the Avengers and orders Megrim to incapacitate them. At that moment, Megrim activated the power in her hands, but a second later, Megrim disappeared from Bloodstorm 1's side. It turned out that Megrim was flown away by Vision. She was confused as to how Vision could escape her control. Vision said that it was true that his synthetic brain was very similar to a human's, so Megrim could influence it. But she couldn't do it when Vision rotated his brain patterns very quickly. Meanwhile, Captain Marvel knocked Bloodstorm 1 down and said that he wasn't that tough when his brain disruptor wasn't there. On the other hand, Megrim was taken to the outer layer of Dark Force and exposed to sunlight until her body exploded in red. Smoke Eater prepares to inhale the ghost, saying how dare he do that, but Cap's shield hits the bottle of smoke first and says he will pay for what happened to Panther. At the same time, Krull released his wire towards Iron Man and said he was ready to dance with him. But Iron Man used the device in his hand that emitted a wildly fluctuating magnetic field, causing Krull to be thrown far away due to the rejection reaction to the magnetic field. Unbeknownst to Iron Man, behind him, Damascene was ready with a piece of steel in his hand that he was going to throw at Iron Man, but Damascene's hand broke first because Vision returned and emitted sunlight. Captain Marvel threw Bloodstorm 1 behind her again, hitting Smoke Eater and causing his smoke bottle to fall. She said that Blood Coven could have beaten them, but even though their powers were only half of what they used to be, they were still the Avengers, so no matter how dark the night was, they would still try to raise the sun. Captain Marvel then pointed her fist at the sky, and the energy shot from her hand pierced the Dark Force layer. An ray of sunlight fell to Earth and illuminated the Avengers, Dracula, and Belle. The Blood Coven members ran towards the smoke behind them, afraid of the sunlight. Bloodstorm 1 also told them to retreat and postpone their battle with the Avengers until another time. At that moment, Captain America was still trying to throw his shield at the smoke, but the Blood Coven had already disappeared, and Captain Marvel held Cap's shoulder to remind him that they would get Impossible back and help their friend. Behind them, Belle told Iron Man that they needed to go somewhere, asking if he knew where Greenwich Village was. A few moments later, Dracula and Belle entered Doctor Strange's house with Iron Man, while behind them, Cap explained to Stephen that they were in a bad position. Currently, Impossible City was under enemy control, and they had also lost Wanda, Thor, and T'Challa. Stephen, in his astral form, said that they had to make a plan immediately, and that he already had Spider-Man and his friend from Midnight Mission here. Inside Stephen's house, Belle was happy to meet Spider-Man, whom she knew. She told him that she couldn't find her father amid all the chaos, but suddenly, Spider-Man looked in pain and held his face. He then pulled off his mask, revealing his glowing red eyes and fangs, indicating that he had turned into a vampire. In Impossible City, the place that is now the headquarters of the king of all vampires. Blade is talking to T'Challa's projection, whom he has tasked with finding his prize, asking if T'Challa has found it. T'Challa says yes, telling Blade that his prize has been buried underground in Wakanda since the fall of ancient Atlantis. Blade orders T'Challa to perform a translocation to bring the gift before him. At that moment, Scarlet Witch's voice is heard congratulating Blade for getting what he wanted. Blade looks at Scarlet Witch, who is in the unusual rune, and brings up the Blood Coven, which has returned with one less member. Scarlet Witch admits that Blade attacked quickly and they didn't notice anything at first, but now that the Avengers' eyes are open, their gaze will destroy Blade. At the Sanctum Sanctorum, Doctor Strange's residence, Spider-Man, who suddenly turned into a vampire, jumped and intended to attack Belle, but Vision held him back and told him to stop. However, Spider-Man ignored him and hit Vision from behind. Brielle prepared her sword and told Spider-Man not to force her to attack, while Dracula and Captain America were ready to help Brielle. Clea released Sidorak's red ribbon to restrain Spider-Man and told Stephen to hurry, and Stephen finally threw the Eye of Agamotto in front of Spider-Man so he could see the truth. Spider-Man closed his eyes and knelt on the ground, saying that he was back. He turned his attention to Brielle and asked if she was okay. Brielle replied that she was fine, but was worried about Spider-Man instead. Spider-Man touched his fangs and said that the man had ordered him to hunt Brielle, and he couldn't fight him. Then Stephen replied that Spider-Man wasn't alone, because he had also come to him and Clea as friends and attacked him. Stephen showed his physical form, which had become a vampire bound by Clea's power. Brielle admitted that she was late because she had originally woken up in Atlanta, and with Dracula's blood mages, she was now in NYC. She asked who he was that they referred to as the cause of all this. Captain Marvel asks in surprise if Brielle doesn't know, while Doctor Strange asks Dracula why he didn't tell Brielle because she must know who he is. Dracula instead questions how their conversation will go if he asks Brielle to go save the world by killing her own father, Blade. Brielle is very surprised, and Dracula explains again that Brielle's father, Eric Brooks, aka Blade, has unleashed his legions of the night on Earth, darkening the sky and defeating the Avengers. Now their only hope lies with Brielle to defeat Blade, which is why Blade has unleashed the Blood Hunt to hunt Brielle. Dracula looks at Brielle and adds that as Blade's flesh and blood, she is his only weakness and can defeat him. But Brielle refuses to believe her father would do such a thing. Tigra questions whether they should believe that Dracula is on their side when he is the president of the vampire nation, but Dracula calls Tigra Voivode, emphasizing that this is the truth. After all, the vampire nation is a country he built with his blood, and that country could fall if he doesn't stop Blade. Hunter's Moon tells them to stop arguing and save it for after they rescue everyone. Stephen praises Khonshu's hand's words, concluding that this crisis consists of 3 vectors. Then Captain Marvel adds that it is the Dark Force stealing the sun, the rampaging vampires, and Blade. Suddenly, Captain Marvel asks about Brielle's whereabouts, and it turns out that Brielle has run out of Stephen's house. Spider-Man blamed Dracula for telling Brielle to fight her own father and hoped she would trust him, but Dracula warned Spider-Man not to advise him. However, Spider-Man told him to be quiet because he wanted to look for Brielle. Spider-Man put his mask back on and immediately ran out, but Dracula didn't want to be left behind. He followed, saying he wouldn't let this chance to win slip away. Stephen tried to call Spider-Man and Dracula, but Clea stopped him because they didn't have time for this. Finally, Stephen stopped and said that he seemed to know where they could ask for help to overcome Dark Force. Tigra said that Midnight Mission had had a plan to deal with the vampires for a long time and just needed to move up their schedule. And Hunter's Moon added that they would gather troops that couldn't be killed by vampires, couldn't be turned into vampires, and weren't afraid of vampires. But they still needed one more piece of help. Captain Marvel replied that the Avengers would face the Blood Coven and Blade, but they were an impossible city, holding Thor, Wanda, and T'Challa hostage. Cap suggested that they lure them out. Clea's spell symbol enveloped Hunter's Moon and Tigra. Hunter's Moon told Lady Clea that as his brother's friend, he asked Clea to send him, Tigra, and someone else far away. Clea agreed for the sake of the Midnight Mission and her memories of Mark Spector. She would send them as far as they wanted before Clea and her husband did the same. Vision asked Captain Marvel if they were just going to wait while their friends and family were being held hostage. And Captain Marvel replied that as Avengers, they needed to give people hope and make Blade come out to shatter that hope. Iron Man asked about Captain Marvel's plan, then Captain Marvel asked how many broadcast systems he could hack into. Iron Man replied that he could hack into all of them if they ignored the FCC fines. Captain Marvel finally tells Iron Man to start broadcasting and tells Sam, aka Cap, to get ready. Hearing this, Sam refuses because Carol is the leader of the Avengers. Carol agrees that she is indeed the leader of the Avengers, but Sam is the icon they need. Carol adds that this is the reason T'Challa saved Sam. Finally, Iron Man creates a computer projection around his body and says that they are connected to the system, and automatic translation is also available digitally whenever Sam is ready. Sam agrees, and he begins by introducing himself as Sam Wilson, aka Captain America, speaking for the Avengers. At that moment, vampires were rampaging in Halifax. Captain America's voice could be heard saying that he understood that it was a difficult time. He explained that the Avengers had been fighting vampires since the Sun Death, just like them. Like them, the Avengers were also wounded, bleeding, and defeated. In Impossible City, Blade watched Sam's broadcast in disbelief as Sam said that they had been here before and were still here now. In Manhattan, Sam's broadcast appears on a TV screen displayed in a store that Belle passes by. Sam adds that this world has seen evil from time to time, be it aliens, monsters, tyrants, or insane people who have taken their homes, their freedom, and their lives. And every time that happens, they, the humans on this earth, always say no to them. In Mexico City, fire engulfs the city, and vampires are biting humans who cannot fight back. Sam continues, saying that when the Kotati came here, they told them no. In Asgard, Tigra, Hunter's Moon, and another figure are running inside a building. They hear Sam's next words. When Null came here, they also said no to him. In Latveria, Doctor Strange's astral form is seen emerging from a teleportation portal with Clea. They hear Sam say in his broadcast that when Hydra took over the Earth, they again said no to them. In Wakanda, T'Challa sees Sam's projection, stating that when Galactus comes here, they will also say no. Hearing this, T'Challa seems to praise Sam's speech with difficulty as he struggles to regain control of himself. Sam continued his speech, saying that if outsiders wanted this home, they would have to fight for it. If they wanted this world, they would have to take it from their hands. And if they wanted this blood, they would have to pay for every drop of it. Even if they took their lives, those lives would be avenged. Sam pointed at the camera and added that the Avengers would avenge those who died and protect those who were still alive because that was their promise as Avengers. The current situation was indeed bad, but as long as they still had breath, as long as there was still hope in their hearts, they would continue to say the same thing to vampires as they did to everyone else. No. Sam lowered his hand and continued, saying that they were still here, and they would definitely win just like before. They just had to hold on until the sun came out again, because the sun would definitely come out again. Sam ended the broadcast by saying, "Captain America, out." At the Sanctum Sanctorum, Iron Man closed the broadcast channel, while Carol said that Sam's speech was perfect. Sam explained that this was what Sam and T'Challa had said at Impossible City a moment ago, and he thought T'Challa would remember it when he heard this. Iron Man asked Carol if this would work to lure Blade out, but Carol looked out the window and replied that she didn't know. But as far as she knew, Blade was a calm person, but the person who currently controlled Blade's body was not someone who could be calm. Sure enough, Blade, who was currently in the Impossible City, shouted angrily, telling Panther that he had to change his previous translocation destination. Blade, with the Blood Coven behind him, said that he could forgive T'Challa's friends if they just kept quiet and accepted their fate. But how dare they give hope to this doomed world? And Blade couldn't allow this when victory was within sight. Blade decided to drop his prize, which had not seen the sky since ancient Atlantis, from the antediluvian cave of Wakanda to the city of New York, so that the first shame sanctuary would become the Avengers' grave. In New York City, vampires are seen chasing humans running for their lives, when suddenly a large hole appears in the black sky and the base of the first sacrilegious shrine begins to appear, and the shrine falls in the middle of the city with fire at its base. Currently in New York, the temple of the first blasphemy appears to be nestled among the skyscrapers, while in Doomstat, Latveria, Clea, and Doctor Strange are meeting with Doctor Doom, who is seated on his throne. Doom comments that things seem bad because the Avengers have lost. The Sorcerer Supreme is in his astral form, and the city of New York has an ancient Atlantis temple as part of its skyline. Doom is convinced that things must be even worse if Stephen has come to him respectfully to ask for help. So he asks Stephen if his assessment of the situation is correct. On the other hand, Blade, Blood Coven, and T'Challa arrive at the temple of the first blasphemy through an orange teleportation portal. Bloodstorm 1 appears to be carrying Scarlet Witch. Blade tells T'Challa that he doesn't know how Blade first built this place, and upon hearing this, T'Challa asks if that means he isn't Blade. Blade confirmed this and added that he was something bigger and would become even bigger. And T'Challa fell silent upon hearing this. They continued into the temple and down the stairs, while Blade continued his speech that this was his plan from the beginning. Something that began thousands of years ago when he awoke for the second time in a pool of blood in a stone sarcophagus, and would now be completed. T'Challa insisted on asking what Blade really was, and Blade finally answered that he was Varna, the first vampire whose soul wandered and now used Daywalker's body as his vessel. Meanwhile, Clea in Latveria exclaimed in surprise that Blade was Varna. Doom explained that it was obvious, especially since several years ago, Varna's minion named Marie Laveau had prepared Blade as a body for Varna's spirit. It seemed that the unique condition of the Daywalker's body made it an ideal vessel. Doom adds that the first attempt failed, but it seems their second attempt was successful. Stephen comments that even so, Latveria's borders are still free of vampires, to which Doom simply replies that he is certainly prepared for his people, and asks what he can do to help Stephen. Stephen explained that they wanted to bring back the sun to face the Dark Force, and Doom replied that he had already prepared a way out for the Dark Force, as there had been several attempts to use the Dark Force, so this was no longer surprising. Clea added that if it was magic, they could do it, especially since they didn't have much time. She asked what Doom needed. Doom replied that he needed to gather powerful wizards and create a large magical formation containing extraordinary magical creatures. Stephen replied that he knew many powerful wizards and could gather them, but Doom refused. He opened a curtain that contained several super kids and explained that he had already recruited children from Stephen's Strange Academy. He then told Strange to give them to Doom immediately so they could begin. Clea looked surprised and was about to ask a question but stopped herself, while Strange asked confusedly what he needed to give to Doom. Doom explained that what would be used here was a great magic, and to do it, Doom had to become the Sorcerer Supreme, so Stephen had to give his position to Doom. Hearing this, Stephen looked shocked. In Asgard, Tigra and Hunter's Moon were hiding behind the palace walls, observing the situation before moving forward, while someone else behind them asked Tigra why heroes usually asked nicely when they wanted something. Tigra looks back and explains that according to the Avengers, Thor has fallen, and that might put the Aesir on their side, or maybe not. Hunter's Moon signals for them to hold their position. Then Tigra adds that they can't ask the Aesir nicely because they're worried they'll refuse, and they don't have time to convince them. After that, the three of them finally cross a bridge. Tigra commented that this man acted as if he had never stolen anything, and the man responded that this woman acted as if she needed input from an Avenger to commit a crime. They then descended a narrow staircase into the basement. Tigra felt strange because there were no guards here, but Hunter's Moon felt that there shouldn't be any guards because no one would dare to do what they were doing. Tigra questioned whether Hunter's Moon was sure they were in the right place. They finally arrived at a giant door with a doorstop and many chains binding it, while Hunter's Moon replied that every priest felt called by the god he believed in, including himself. Hunter's Moon greeted something behind the door by calling him Father and stating that Hunter's Moon had come for him. Hunter's Moon looked into the prison cell through a small window, and the god inside replied that Hunter's Moon was a good son for visiting him, but that it was foolish because this god did not have the power to open the door, and Hunter's Moon did not have the key to open it. Hunter's Moon admitted that he did not have the key to open the door, but he had brought something better. At that moment, a man introduced himself as Wrecker, and Hunter's Moon added that only an Asgardian crowbar was the best tool to open the Asgardian prison lock. Wrecker used his crowbar to pry open the prison door. Meanwhile, Blade, who was Varna, walked to the top of the temple towards Cruel, who was collecting blood from Thor's pierced head. Blade told T'Challa behind him about the time he was in ancient Atlantis to rewrite the Darkhold on paper for the first time, which was when he first became who he is now. He added that, with the living Darkhold and the blood of the gods in his hands, as well as the temple where he was most powerful, he could continue the ritual, but T'Challa said he didn't understand. At that moment, Blade received a bowl of Thor's blood from Bloodstorm 1 and drank it. His eyes glowed red, and he explained that his vampire form was a cocoon phase for him because he had another goal, which was to become the end of everything. The temple glowed red, and the spell symbols around the building also glowed red. At that moment, Blade declared that he was ready and told the Dark Force to come to him. Blade floated in the air, and the Dark Force from the sky gathered and entered his body. He asked if they could see that he had become one with all dimensions of darkness, that he would become one with the darkness that devoured light and become a vampire that consumed entire planets and stars, and that he would eventually become the unliving Dark Force. Suddenly, T'Challa pointed at something in front of them and asked what it was. Seeing what T'Challa was pointing at, Blade looked shocked and said that this was impossible. In front of them was a full moon shining brightly in the dark sky. In the midst of people carrying weapons to face the vampires, a triangular teleportation portal appeared, which became the entrance for troops of white-clad soldiers called Moon Knight. This troops was fearless, bloodless, and merciless. They descended among the vampires carrying sticks in their right and left hands. At the top of the first insult shrine, Blade saw the arrival of Moon Knight. He realized that this was the work of the moon god, but he thought it was too late to make any changes. At that moment, T'Challa pulled out a piece of steel and was about to stab Blade, but before he could touch him, Blade's dark force power blocked T'Challa's attempt. Blade said it was impossible for T'Challa to defy him because the blood in his body was Blade's own blood. T'Challa said that Wakanda had also fought vampires before, and their god had never abandoned them. T'Challa also said that the heart-shaped potion he had drunk had fought the Varna infection in his body and healed him little by little. Angrily, Blade shouted that the amount of potion was too little and it was already too late to do anything, and he questioned T'Challa's intention to kill him with such a small sword. T'Challa replied that he had no such intention, as he had only taken the sword so that Thor could join them. It was clear that Thor had regained consciousness because T'Challa had removed the piece of metal from his head. Thor said that he would avenge all the insults he had received. From above, Iron Man's voice could be heard adding that this was just cool talk about revenge, and it was clear that Captain Marvel, Vision, and Captain America had also joined them on top of the temple. Blade challenged them all to come forward and face the unliving Dark Force. In Latveria. Hearing Doom's conditions, Clea became angry and pointed at Doom, saying that Doom still had no shame, both for involving the children from Strange's school and for the conditions he had given. Doom replied that he had knowledge of the ritual to lift the darkness, but he couldn't do it without the position of Sorcerer Supreme. Doom told Clea that he wanted to save the world, which was the duty of the Sorcerer Supreme. Stephen agreed with Doom, saying that Doom had tricked him. He asked if Doom had allowed all these events to happen just for a moment like this. Hearing this accusation, Doom remained silent. In Central Park, New York. Captain Marvel shouted the command to the Avengers, "Avengers assemble!" So the Avengers immediately moved to attack the Blood Coven in front of them. Vision attacked Unusual and called Wanda, who finally broke free from Unusual's power. Wanda opened her eyes and knelt to gather her strength again, saying that she was finally free again to take revenge. On the other hand, Black Panther was in trouble because his leg was being pulled by Bloodstorm 1. He shouted for help, and Captain America came and kicked Bloodstorm 1 in the face so that he would release Black Panther. Cap and Black Panther prepared to attack again, and Sam said that they all missed T'Challa. T'Challa thanks them for their help in his speech, saying that he heard it. Thor approaches Blade and tells Varna that it has been thousands of years since they last met. Thor extends his hand to summon Mjolnir, adding that he would be happy to reintroduce Mjolnir to him. Blade carried his two swords and replied that Mjolnir was far away in orbit. He intended to kill Thor first, before Mjolnir arrived to find out which of the two gods was superior. Blade finally advanced with the power of Dark Force behind him, while Thor prepared his fists with the power of lightning behind him. At that moment, Iron Man was using his hand blasts to attack the enemy while telling Wanda to use the Montesi formula. But Wanda, who was also using her powers to fight the enemy, refused. She said that the Montisai formula was uncontrollable and she didn't want to kill everyone like she did before. Hearing this, Bloodstorm 1 pulled Vision's hand away and commented that the Avengers were weak, which was why Blood Coven was able to defeat them. Bloodstorm 1 through Vision, who was then approached by Wanda. Bloodstorm 1 added that their humanity was keeping victory from them, while the Blood Coven had abandoned their humanity long ago. In Latveria, Doom spoke again to Stephen, saying that the Avengers were busy with Varna and his minions, and that the moon god Khonshu had released his followers of Death on Earth to fight the vampires, but that it would not be enough. According to Stephen, Doom wants to say that his goal is honorable, but Stephen wants proof that he has been wrong about Doom all this time. He wants a promise from him that when the world is saved, Doom will return what belongs to Stephen. Doom was silent, but then he said that Stephen had his promise, the word of Doom. Hearing this, Stephen agreed, but Clea tried to stop Stephen. However, Stephen still took something glowing from inside his chest and gave it to Doom. He told Clea that he already had Doom's word, and that Doom was right, that this was the reason why the Sorcerer Supreme existed. Stephen handed the glowing thing to Doom, explaining that it was part of his soul, and he had to bind it to Doom's soul, just as Clea had given her soul to Stephen when Stephen died. With Stephen now among the undead, he would give this title to Doom. Doom then placed Stephen's soul inside his chest, realizing that this was how Stephen had done it, as he had always wondered about it. With the light enveloping Doom's body, Clea couldn't see what was happening and asked if it had worked, but Stephen nodded and paid homage to the Sorcerer Supreme. Doom gathered power in his hands and replied that the homage was not for the Sorcerer Supreme, but for Doom. In Manhattan, Dracula takes Brielle up to a lamppost and shows her where Blade has summoned his palace, the Arrogance. Dracula asks Brielle if she is scared and has forgotten her purpose after seeing this. Brielle replies that after what they have been through, her intention is already written in her heart with fire. At that moment, Spider-Man climbs up the pole and asks if Brielle is going to fight her own father, and Brielle replies that Spider-Man doesn't understand her feelings, because she has to do it since only she has this power. Spider-Man removed his mask and said that he actually understood, but would Brielle do it? Brielle drew her sword and said that she was cold and sharp because she was a blade. Her father had trained her this way, and she knew that a blade was trained to be able to cut. Brielle jumped down, held by Dracula, and Spider-Man followed behind them. At the temple, Blade uses his tentacle-shaped dark force power to freeze Thor, telling Thor that he hates him the most among the Avengers because the other Avengers are children of the 20th century, while Thor and Varna both understand what it's like to see the end of the world. While Varna was busy talking, Thor reached out his hand, and Mjolnir returned to his hand, causing a thunderous explosion around Thor's body that threw Blade away. On the other hand, Iron Man, who was under attack from Damascene's sharp fingers, asked Carol to shoot at the sky again so they could get sunlight. But Carol, who was attacking Smoke Eater with shots from her hand, replied that it was difficult because the dark force layer was too thick and she wasn't even sure she could fly through it. Suddenly, Damascene's head, which was cornering Iron Man, was hit by a shot from Vision's Mind Stone. Vision said that this was the remaining solar energy after all the darkness and power he had expended had drained his solar energy. Vision would help ward off this creature while Iron Man focused on their real enemy. At that moment, a voice said that Iron Man didn't need to do this alone, and Iron Man recognized the voice as Moon Knight. Moon Knight admitted that he had returned with the friends. Moon Knight climbed the stairs to the top of the temple with the followers of the Moon God following behind him. Meanwhile, in Latveria, the 6 children from Strange Academy had gathered in a circle in a round room. Doom climbed the stairs there while explaining that the spell to dispel the Dark Force dimension originated from the time before the fall of Atlantis, and was written by the same figure who wrote the Darkhold during that time of darkness. Doom stood in the center of the circle with his hands raised above his head, the power of the Sorcerer Supreme swirling above his hands. He added that Latverian archaeologists had succeeded in discovering ancient Atlantean knowledge and artifacts around the world. Stephen interrupted him, saying that many believed they were looting these relics, But according to Doom, it was just a difference of opinion, and Doom had already used this knowledge to find a way to open the Varna ritual. The children of the Strange Academy raised their hands, emitting rays of their own colors, and the rays gathered in Doom's hands as the Sorcerer Supreme. He explained that from humans, Falteens, fairies, and the Weird World race, he would weave their different colors of magic together, something that had never been done before. Doom's body glowed as he declared he would lead their ritual and unite their efforts to save the world, asking the children to give everything to him. At Temple, Bloodstorm 1 intends to stab Vision's body with his claws to get blood to drink, but his hand passes through Vision's body. Moon Knight immediately helps Vision by using his scythe to hit Bloodstorm 1, saying that he must do better than this. Moon Knight then choked Bloodstorm 1 and told Vision to burn him, but Vision, who looked weak, replied that he couldn't do it because he had run out of solar energy. At that moment, Cruel used his barbed wire to tie up Vision and Moon Knight. Bloodstorm 1 finally got back up, commenting that they were weak. He said he would grant them mercy before drinking their blood, showing them the victory of his master, Varna. At that moment, the tentacles of Varna's dark force bound all the Avengers and Moon Knight. Carol said that whatever they did to Blade, it couldn't hurt him, and he could even absorb their powers, while according to Wanda, Blade absorbed dark force throughout the dimensions and grew stronger every moment. Blade replied that he had only one weakness, which was his daughter, and she wasn't here. Suddenly, Brielle's voice said that she was here to save her father. From above, Brielle, who was carried by Dracula, descended and stabbed Blade in the chest with her sword, but Varna said it was too late, because even though Brielle was Blade's descendant, she was not Varna's descendant. At that moment, Spider-Man arrived and asked what would happen if they both stabbed him. He also grabbed the hilt of Brielle's sword, arguing that since Varna had turned him into a vampire, he was also Varna's descendant. This succeeded in making Blade release black energy from his mouth, even though he shouted his refusal. At the same time in Latveria, Doom sensed that Varna's concentration was divided, and that was when Doom directed the energy he had gathered to reverse Varna's spell. In the sky, it was visible that the Sorcerer Supreme's rays were beginning to dispel the previously black sky. Meanwhile, Blade was still emitting dark force from his mouth, and Wanda used her powers to free Blade so that Varna could leave his body. Seeing this, Brielle ran towards Blade and called out to her fallen father. Blade fell to the floor covered in blood, and Brielle apologized to him for stabbing him, but Blade justified Brielle's decision because it was in line with his teachings. After that, Carol flew away while instructing Wanda to keep Varna frozen in her red crystal. Then she told Thor and Sam to chase after Moon Knight and Vision, and told T'Challa and Tony to make sure Blade didn't die. Iron Man, Wanda, and T'Challa approached Blade. Iron Man kneels and says he has medical equipment in his armor, though it will leave an ugly scar, and Blade responds that one more scar won't make a difference. Next, Captain America reports to the Avengers that Moon Knight and Vision are fine and that the Blood Coven fled when Varna fell. Behind him, Thor and Moon Knight are seen helping Vision stand up. Scarlet Witch also reported that Varna was under her control, and that Blade's condition was stable. Blade was seen being carried away on Iron Man's robotic stretcher. Captain Marvel, who was ascending into the sky, said that whether it was because of their efforts or what Strange had done, the dark force in the sky had begun to disappear. At that moment, light began to shine down on the Earth from the sky, and Carol declared that they had won once again. At Doom's place, after finishing his attack, he and Stephen were now in a black room with no one else around. Stephen praised Doom's magic, which he found amazing, and Doom thanked him for the compliment. Stephen then asked for the Sorcerer Supreme robe back, as promised by Doom, but Doom remained silent. So Stephen reminded Doom of his promise. Doom admitted that he had promised to return the title of Sorcerer Supreme after he saved the world. But this was only the beginning, and Doom never did anything halfway. Doom finally created colorful magical energy surrounding his body and Stephen's. Then he waved his hand towards Stephen's astral body, causing Stephen's body to scatter like smoke. Doom's eyes then glowed green, and he said he would show how he saved the world. back where the Avengers were. Spider-Man happily approached the reappearing sun, but he realized that he had become a vampire and covered his body so he wouldn't burn in the sun, but he found that his body did not burn under the sun's rays. Dracula smiled and said that the sun no longer stung, and it seemed that their kind would be able to see the dawn in the future. Spider-Man responds with horror upon hearing the term "their kind" uttered by Dracula. Dracula replies that, like it or not, the blood of Varna flows through the bodies of Miles Morales and Dracula, but for the first time, they no longer need to fear the sun's rays. Miles asks how that is possible, and Dracula answers that since they saved the world owes them. Carol looked at the other Avengers and said that they couldn't rest because it was still nighttime in half of the world, so they needed to move. But Iron Man suddenly said that there was a priority broadcast being aired worldwide. Iron Man used a projection from his armored suit to broadcast the message, and Doom was seen saying that the vampire threat was over and their world was safe again, so they needed to thank their new Sorcerer Supreme, Victor Von Doom. And that's how the world nearly fell. Not to gods, not to cosmic forces, but to creatures that finally found a world made perfectly for them. Events like this remind us that even the strongest heroes are vulnerable when the rules of their universe suddenly change. And sometimes survival depends on adapting faster than the darkness closing in. So what do you think? Was this vampire uprising one of Marvel's most terrifying takeovers? And which character or moment in Blood Hunt stood out the most for you? Let me know, and tell me what storyline you want Panelix to break down next. Thanks for watching. This is Panelix. Have a nice day.